important things now.
Ram Ram, Namaste. We are live on the Go Dharmic pages and with a very, very special guest, Parvati Didi, Parvati Markus. I say Parvati Didi in Hindi, as you know, I mean, sister, elder sister. I kind of feel like we are family. So, I just wanted to say thank you for not just being here, but for doing everything that you do, because it inspires all of us. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me here.
I hope everybody can hear us and see us okay. We were supposed to try and talk last week. And if anybody is struggling, please just, type something in the comments or message, and we'll pick that up and make sure that we are able to see it okay. So that is there. Stani, also, please do let me know if we have any sound issues. I think we're absolutely fine. So the reason why I was super keen to invite you to speak to the whole community that has been working with Go Dharmic this past decade is that it's all inspired by Maharaji, really. Like the whole thing is his prasad. We are just trying to listen to that whisper in the heart that you mentioned as the title of the book. And I just wanted to share that love everyone was something that I just gave to everybody. When people ask me, what is Go Dharmic about? What is the work that you do in this, social work, helping others? I just kind of naturally, rather than giving them an instruction manual or, giving them guidance on Go Dharmic, I said, if you read this book, you'll kind of, rather than understanding it from here about the work that we're trying to do, just read this book, and people's heart will tell you what we're trying to achieve here. So I would like to kind of, for you to share with people, like maybe we can start with that, your experiences of Maharaji and love everyone, and then we can come to what all these strange people that are appearing now in Whisper in the Heart.
Well, when we were with Maharaji, back in 1971, 72 in India with him, and people asked me, well, what did you do during the day? When we weren't sitting directly in front of Maharaji and just sitting in that space of extraordinary unconditional love, we were telling stories. Stories by Maharaji's older devotees, the people who had been with him for like 40 years, like Dada Mukherjee, Tiwari. And, they would tell us story after story after story. And we would tell, each other whatever had happened with us with Maharaji. So story became sort of the foundation of the communication of that space in the heart. And excuse me. When I did Love Everyone, that was interviews with about 70 people of the Westerners who had gone to India and been with Maharaji. So it was sort of collecting those stories that we had been, people had been asking all of us for all those years of what was it like? How did you get to Maharaji? What happened? So that's the way Love Everyone started. But when Love Everyone came out, other people started coming up to me and saying, well, I've got a story about Maharaji too, but I met him after he left his body. So the natural next step was collecting some of the stories from people who have met Maharaji since he left his body in 1973. And some of the stories go back to letters that were written to Ram Dass or Krishna Das, back in the snail mail days. And others were things that we gathered through interviews with people.
It's
So,
amazing.
yeah. Story is really sort of the foundation of bhakti in a lot of ways. It's how we share the bhav, how we share that space.
Yeah. And I think that's how we can actually live in it rather than just understanding it from the mind. We become part of the story, right? Like we are, when we keep reciting the Ramayana or reading the Ramayana, we actually understand the various personalities and the way that they have the nuance of how Hanuman is so active and energetic and moving from here and then, how loving Sita is, or how dutiful Ram is, and how he wants to. So similarly, I find that we have Maharaji's personality, that when we hear these stories, we kind of understand the way he laughed, or they understand the way he wanted to feed people, and the urgency of sharing that, and that energy. Then we can associate with it. We can become a part of an extension of that feeling. So, do you see that, like, with the people who were with Maharaji initially and were fortunate to spend time with him in the body, now Whisper in the Heart is an extension of that? And how does that, how
absolutely.
You mentioned in the book about Ram Dass saying that he felt sometimes uncomfortable with how people in the body who shared time with Maharaji in person, and then this community of people who's appearing now. How does that connect?
Oh, well, as Ram Dass put it, and I think I have that in the introduction to the
Right.
book, is that, of course, he met thousands and thousands of people, from all the lecturing that he did, and all the ways in which he communicated his stories, right? And so he met many, many people who had connected with Maharaji, who had never met Maharaji in the body. And the way he said it was that everybody he met, all these people that he met, were just as strong devotees as those of us who had met him in the body. It made no difference. And one of the things I loved about gathering these stories was how much Maharaji's humor came through. It's like being with him was such incredible fun. He was such a delight, not only just to watch him, which is what we used to love to do, is just sit there and stare at him, but also, that he would make us laugh. And he's still doing that. I mean, and a lot of the stories, there's even one woman, that, he sort of appeared to, shall we say. I mean, she felt his presence very strongly. And what he was telling her was to go laugh. And she eventually became somebody who teaches laughter yoga around the world.
Could you tell us some of the stories from Whisper in the Heart, of some that have really touched your heart after listening to these?
Sure. Let me see. One of the things I love is that you don't have to be like sitting in meditation and trying to connect to Maharaji to experience it. It can happen in the midst of everyday life, doing the most mundane type of things. Right. So this is a story. This is from a letter to Ram Dass from somebody named Lynn. My dad died in January. Being an only child and having lost my mother 5 years previously, I was engulfed in grief. Luke, my son, and I went to Mississippi to settle things. When I returned home, I latched onto, Ram Dass is coming. Hooray. He'll say just the right thing. Everything will be fine. I was looking for another daddy to make it all better. The big weekend arrived, 2 months to the day after my dad passed. I was an emotional wreck, praying to make it to the auditorium to hear the words. My babysitter had backed out, and I was feeling nervous about having Luke there, not wanting him to distract me from my salvation. Ram Dass began his talk, and Luke settled into nursing and sleep. He had spoken only for a minute or two when another mom from Lama Foundation, pushed her 4-year-old daughter in at my feet and said, "I have to go," and quickly disappeared out the door. Luke immediately sat up and forgot sleep. They were noisy, of course, and I had to bring them outside. I was so angry, scared, and sure there was no hope of hearing the words that I was beside myself. As I sat glumly on the steps, I kept hearing laughter, a kind of giggling. I knew it wasn't the kids. They were playing below me, and this was coming from above. I was angry that someone dared detract from the words that I was having to miss. I jumped up to find the culprit, wheeled around, and there he was, that beloved man in the blanket at the top of the stairs. He was laughing at me with those twinkling eyes. He said, though not with words, "Your place is here. It is all here," and then was gone that fast. I can't begin to tell you the healing those brief moments were in my life. I was so set on the form that my salvation had to take. Little did I know that by not being in the auditorium with Ram Dass, that I would be with Maharaji more deeply than I've ever known. It was my miracle of love, thanks to Neem Karoli Baba, the ultimate love.
Wow.
So that's what I meant about there you are. The kids are noisy. You can't go do what you wanted, what you think is the spiritual thing to do. And yet there he is.
In the midst of everyday life and
in the midst of everyday life. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think embracing, it just seems like to me that Maharaji represents us in embracing our humanity, embracing the dharma of humanity and life, in being with each other. That if you think when I spoke to Krishna Das a few months ago, he said every time he blinked and even when he closed his eyes, he was off somewhere serving somebody. His whole life was service and serving people, serving us, serving each other, serving the heart in the world. What comes across now to you in terms of service? Because we're living in a world, like especially when I think about Go Dharmic and the work that we have to do, times are so difficult now. We have wars, particularly here with Russia and Ukraine. We have currently a campaign that we're just working on, like Pakistan, with floods and a third of the country really underwater, climate change, and people suffering so much. And I think this whisper in the heart and the people that feel that and that happens to them in terms of service and that love and service. We had Larry Brilliant tell his diary entries in Love Everyone. In terms of service and whisper in the heart, what do you see the importance? We've spoken about it privately, but in terms of that service, what comes out in whisper in the heart?
Well, it really goes back to Maharaji's basic instructions to us. I mean, he was not a teacher. He didn't lecture. He didn't feed our intellect in any way. He really put us directly onto the path of bhakti yoga, that it was all about the heart. It was about not only the whisper in the heart, but also sharing that heart. And his basic instructions to us were love everyone, feed everyone, remember God, and tell the truth. That was the whole of his teaching. And that feed everyone is that place of, well, what do you do with this bhakti? What do you do with this overflow of the heart? Is you find a way to feed people.
Right.
Whether that's with food, as Go Dharmic did with the Ukrainian refugees coming across the border, or whether it's, in another way. I mean, my service has been, putting together these types of books and sharing, sharing it that way. Other people do it with whatever they're doing. It doesn't matter what you're what you're doing. I mean, assuming you're not, manufacturing guns or something, but
yeah. So you've had that, and you said in your introduction to Whisper in the Heart that you've helped birth these books. I love that expression that Be Here Now. Initially, you helped
right.
Ram Dass tell that story that again came through, and then could you share some of the other books that you've worked on over this period
Oh,
that's led up
well,
to Whisper in the Heart.
yeah. I mean, I helped to put together and edit Dada Mukherjee's books, By His Grace and The Near and the
So beautiful.
Dear. I did KK's book. I did Krishna Das's book. I mean, I've spent a lot of time. Presently I'm working with Ramdev on his book. He's the
Yeah.
director of the Living Dying Project.
And you've been
So,
helping me with be yourself as well for
right.
months now. We've been working on that, which I really appreciate your help.
Yeah,
It's been
right.
wonderful to kind of help develop that.
Mhm.
This I kind of consider Whisper in the Heart really important for a new generation of seekers,
Mhm.
to be able to connect with that space in everyone's heart that Maharaji represents, that Maharaji is, not
Right.
necessarily, because I think people today won't connect with organized religion in the same
Mhm.
way as previous traditions. It's much more of an individual journey and much more of listening to that whisper in the heart, as you say. I find people have that journey they're much more open to hearing their own hearts now, rather than seeking in organized tradition or visiting. So, do you, do you want to share something about how somebody can listen to that whisper in the heart? Like, these are people who have
Right.
shared it. You within 3 days you were working with Ram Dass, and then finding your way to India. I would love to hear your own feeling about how you found Maharaji inside your heart, and how others can listen to it.
Well, I first, was bent on finding Maharaji in the body. It wasn't until he left his body that we had to, say, oh my God, there's no more finding it outside. Now we have to find it inside.
Right.
So that was a very, my seeking to go to India, all of that was an external journey. Now it's a much more internal one. And as you see in the book, I sort of tried to divide it very, into the different ways that people found that place inside themselves. For some people, it's through a dream. Those kinds of dreams that are more real than everyday life. Which we call darshan dreams. Where you're actually in the presence of that being. Which is another thing I wanted to say. This book is about Maharaji, but anybody who's got any sort of connection to, Jesus, or to any sort of Ramana Maharshi, anybody that's another form of that, or another manifestation of that oneness of that place, will find the same thing. I mean, as some people in the book, it was like somebody was already a Mayor Baba devotee and said, well, how can I have both of them? Mayor Baba said, don't go to other people, so how can I also have Maharaji? And then in a dream found both of them sitting next to each other and, form, sort of trading places.
I love that. And
Yeah.
that's really interesting. That it made me, as soon as you said that, reminded me of the Mahabharata, where Arjuna is with Krishna. Obviously, he's a big uh, lover of Krishna, and he's going to the Himalayas because he wants to get some weapons from Lord Shiva to be able to fight the great war that's coming. And he leaves a gift of shoes with Krishna before he leaves. And as he then goes up to the Himalayas, when he gets to the top of the mountain and he's going there to worship Lord Shiva, he finds the same shoes that he gave to Krishna on the top of the mountain. And it just came to my mind that image that, and he hears a voice which says, anybody who worships Krishna worships Shiva. Anyone that worships Shiva worships Krishna. It's all one. And that's
Oh, Maharaji used to say that all the time. It was always sub ek. It's all one. He used to say Christ and Hanuman are one. Christ and Hanuman are one. And if you think of their images, I mean, there's Hanuman, ripping open his heart to show you that, Ram and Sita and Lakshman lived within his heart, right? And it's like the heart of Christ.
Yeah. I was at the
It's
Sacre Coeur in Paris last week, and on top of the mountain there's a Jesus with his heart almost open in the same way,
open.
with the heart there, but you can visualize
Mm,
the fact.
right.
We don't listen to that, do we? As human beings, we up here we always see that difference,
All right.
individual
We make
differences.
divisions, yeah, where there are none. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel that that's why, for me, some people might question Go Dharmic. It's a social organization. We're serving people food. What is the importance of speaking to Parvati Markus about a book called Whisper in the Heart about, this guy in a blanket from India? And I think the real importance is that inner social work is inner social work and outer social work. I think Ram Dass also considered all of the work that he was doing to be social work,
Hmm.
inner work and outer work, and therefore, if we can't be love, if we can't listen to that heart space, then we're probably not really doing the social work outside from the heart, and then it's going to probably have a negative impact on the people we're looking to serve as well. So that's why I think your messages through these books is so profoundly important,
Mm.
because it's allowing us to serve from the heart. It's allowing us to connect, and so many people who volunteer with us have resonated with messages in love of everyone. And the other books that you've mentioned, particularly Be Here Now or Dada's books, KK's book, I think it's such an important message for people who are serving in the world, who are open to the suffering of others, to be able to connect with that place within their own hearts and distribute prasad from the heart, uh,
Mm.
uh, wherever it is. And perhaps you could share another one of the entries
Oh,
from the book. It
okay.
would be lovely to. I don't want to give away the whole book to people because
Let me see. Uh, Well, one of the sections of the book is I call Cry for Help. And frequently, one of the ways people come into this space with one of these types of beings like Maharaji is because they're in pain in one way or another and they need help. I mean, that's how I first met Maharaji before I went to India, as I was coming down from an acid trip and I was getting scared. And I had just met Ram Dass, and he had given me this little black and white picture of Maharaji and the New Hampshire wooden mala. And I sat in front of this little picture going, I'm scared, and you've got to help me. Because it was a time of year when Ram Dass was off in Lama Foundation. There were no phones. I couldn't get in touch with him. I hadn't yet met my first meditation teacher, so it was, we're talking 1969 here, folks.
right.
So, um, so I sat in front of this picture of Maharaji, and eventually this picture sort of dissolved in blue light. And I could see Maharaji moving. I could see, somebody moving in there. And it was just like that. It was a quick thing. But it gave me enough feeling of security, of being, that somebody was with me, that I could lie down and go through the rest of the trip and everything was okay. And needless to say, after that, I got a much larger picture of Maharaji. And I basically lived my life in front of it, talking to this photo. I mean, I didn't tell anybody. You didn't tell anyone. You went around talking to a picture back then anyway. And, once in a while, I would feel like I would see him in the picture. I would see him moving. And when I finally got to India and was with Maharaji, one of the first things he said to me was, you used to talk to my picture all the time, he said. You asked many questions. So that's how I know for sure that people can meet Maharaji, meet somebody like Maharaji, uh, whether they're in a body or not.
It's incredible.
So anyway, now let me find a story for you because I wanted to do one from the Cry for Help 206. Okay, this is a story from Val Cheney. She's actually Pete Holmes' wife.
Okay.
Pete Holmes is the one who wrote the foreword for the book. And
All right. Right.
yeah. I came to the retreat in Maui because I love Ram Dass. I understood that what Ram Dass was transmitting was Maharaji, but he wasn't in the forefront for me. I saw him as maybe the same thing as Christ, which was the narrative I grew up with. I was able to access it through Jesus. I had the same kind of upbringing Pete Holmes, my husband, did, very fundamental Christian. We had pictures of Maharaji in our house because of Pete. I would look at the pictures, but I wasn't really interested in engaging in a relationship with him. I didn't know how I felt about it. When I saw that big picture of Maharaji at the retreat, I got it. But I wondered, am I just trading Jesus for Maharaji? I called him Maharaj Jesus. When we came to the retreat, our daughter was 8 months old. When she was 4 months old, she had had a bad UTI with a high fever, and we had to go to the emergency room. She had to get a catheter put in multiple times, and I worried that it was traumatic for her. It was traumatic for us, too, the hardest thing I've ever gone through. When we came to the retreat in May, she was acting exactly how she had when she had the UTI, with the exact same symptoms. I fell apart. I knew the way you know when you're a mother what was happening. I was rocking her, and she was doing this heavy breathing that she had only ever done from the pain of the UTI. Pete was out swimming in the ocean, so I was alone with her, trying to get her to sleep. Her body was so tense. She was doing that breathing, and I couldn't get her to relax. I was crying. It suddenly occurred to me to ask Maharaji to intervene. I was very specific. I remember saying, "All right, Maharaji, this isn't a test. You don't have to prove yourself. That's not what this is. But here I am. I'm here at this retreat, and you're on my mind. And so if you could help us out with this, that would be great. But it's not a test." That's a big Christian thing. Don't test God. But it's also that I didn't want it to be like, this is your chance to prove yourself, and then I'll be in your camp. As soon as I said those words to Maharaji, instantly her whole body relaxed and she gave this deep exhale. And I knew, just like I had known that it was a UTI, I knew in that moment it was gone. And it was. There was no sign of it after that. I came out of the room and saw Pete in the ocean, and we had a beautiful swim. I was crying, and I told Pete what had happened. It felt like we were swimming in love.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. And I think that crying for help, crying for love. There was something I was reading recently about longing, like that when we long for the beloved in our lives, that's when we actually can hear the whisper much more.
Oh, that's all of Rumi, isn't it?
Yeah.
That this longing, this yearning, this, this feeling that, life may seem great on the surface, but there's still something inside that's longing for something more. Yeah. That's what pulls us towards that light. Yeah.
And you feel it so strongly in when you sit by Maharaji's tucket in Kenchi. Now, even as somebody like myself, I never met Maharaji in the body, but every time I open my eyes, I feel like I'm in his presence. I can feel so strongly that connection, and you feel it through these books. You feel it through the diary entries. You feel it through Whisper in the Heart, or fellow people who have just, felt that warmth of the sunshine. It's the only real way I can describe it. It's like sunshine that people feel, and but it's not just like ordinary sunshine. It's something that's so difficult to describe with words, isn't it?
It's very difficult. It's like people say, well, what was it like sitting with Maharaji? And it's like, it's so hard to describe, because on one level, we were just sitting there staring at him. You couldn't close your eyes. I mean, if you tried to sit and meditate, he'd throw a piece of fruit at you, So it was like, so it was so fascinating, so endlessly fascinating to watch this old man in a blanket, that it was just unbelievable how strong that pull and that attraction was. And people think, well, you must have been in bliss all the time. And it was like, oh God, no. I mean, half the time I was down by the river crying, because when the light is that bright, when that sun is shining on you, when you're sitting in the presence of that extraordinary love, everything within you that blocks it in any way suddenly looms a lot larger. The shadow seems so much bigger. And that's like Ram Dass saying to Maharaji, I'm not pure enough to go back yet, because you could see everything inside of you that in some way blocked the light. So that was distressing. So there was, people have to understand there was both, the path is not straight up. Let's just put it that way. It's not straight up. Yeah.
So you kind of see a lot of your ego and darkness and dark things coming up more when that's there.
Yeah.
Stuff to work with.
Yeah. So although in his presence, of course, that all got shoved to the side. It was like you were too busy, inhaling the air around him. But when he left, it was like you're left with, okay, well, how do I receive more of his light? How do I receive more of that love? And then you have to start doing those things that are going to clean up any of those obstacles. And service is a wonderful way to do that. I mean, by doing your Dharmic service, in whatever way you do it, whether that's, changing dirty diapers at home with your kids, or feeding refugees at the border. It's the same type of thing, depending on the space that you're doing it from.
Yeah. I think when he's telling us to feed the poor, or, he's just telling us to stop for a second, to stop thinking about our own ego for a second, and just come out of that. And then, you feel more at one with others when you're not just feeding yourself, when you're not just eating for your own being, when you're sharing it, when you're spreading that love.
Yeah, of course, somebody sitting by themselves in a cave is also doing that. It doesn't have to be person to person. I mean, there's so many people that are not comfortable, being either in crowds of people or working, one-on-one with somebody. But when they sit down and they're by themselves and they're meditating and they're sending out metta, they're doing the same type of service.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I think it's so beautiful to hear these different voices of all the various different ways that people connect with Maharaji in so many different ways. Almost when I look at the stories of people who have engaged with him, they're so different. Somebody is connected almost through a Buddhist path. Somebody is connected through a business that they've then launched, and it's not like everybody's come out the same. And the color and difference of the manifestation of that love in different ways is almost difficult to grasp. Some people may not even realize that they're distributing Maharaji's prasad.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's one of the things, is there are so many ways to connect. I mean, I go through things where people have connected through a photo, like I did, originally, or through books, or through a lot of people through chanting. When people sit with Krishna Das or Jayutal or any Nina Rao, any of the wonderful kirtanwalas, that are singing, and they're singing from that space, and they're singing to that oneness, and bringing you into that space. And that's the way many people connect. And, then through dreams, or through the cry for help, or through going to retreats, I mean, a lot of people over the years have been to retreats with Ram Dass or
Yeah.
with Krishna Das or Jai or all of these different people. And something special seems to happen during those times to folks when they put aside their world for a moment and said, all I'm going to do is listen for that whisper in my heart.
And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
what I see with being in KD's present when he's chanting, spending time with you, listening to Ramdas. Ramdas said when we were working on Be Yourself, he said, I will give you my everything. I will give you my everything. He's literally just dropped his entire ego, and this was in the final stages of his life where he was like emanating Maharaji so beautifully.
Yeah.
For so many people who in Whisper in the Heart, when they're speaking about their connection through Ramdas, it's just Maharaji pouring through him. There's not much of Ramdas really
Right.
left there apart from just Maharaji's sunshine coming through.
Yeah. He called it becoming nobody.
Yeah, yeah,
First, you have to become somebody, and then you have to become nobody.
yeah. And I think that those voices that you've shared show all of those different rays of sunshine that are coming through, just of us being able to open our hearts to a space to find Jesus within, to find Hanuman within, to find Ram within. It's so important. And the Rig Veda has a verse, Ikam Sat Vipraha Bahuda Vedante. Ikam Sat means one truth. Vipraha is the wise one or the saints. Bahuda means bhot, like in the many.
Right.
Vedante, knowledge, many different paths. So the one truth is found through many different paths. It's the most ancient teaching, 6,000 years, 7,000 years, and I feel Maharaji spirit and all these different angles of rays of sunshine sharing the same knowledge represents that, and it's so important to share. So important.
Well, wasn't this knowledge originally called what? The Sanatana Dharma?
Yeah, Sanatana Dharma.
Right. And what does that mean? That means
It means the universal way, the eternal way, or the eternal path or way of living for all, the universal way for everyone. It's not a single path. It's the forest. It is the jungle, if you like, the whole of nature.
right. Yeah.
And I
It's like
think
the
that
difference between the Upaguru and the Satguru. I
yeah,
mean, people have asked me a lot, people that have, I've done some interviews with who are not on this particular path. And they always say, well, explain what a guru is,
right,
and, because they look at us calling Maharaji, my guru, and then they think of somebody saying, well, I've got a golf guru, or I've got a, you know, the difference between the Upa gurus, who are your teachers, who take you, another step or two along the path, and then the Satguru, the one who is the truth, who leads you to the truth of who you are. Now, guru is what? The remover of darkness. And so the Satguru is the one who removes any darkness between who you are and the truth of your being. And
right. Yeah. And I just got on the front of the book, which I have printed a cover. Krishna Das on the front has written, Maharaji turns on the light to give us a glimpse of what we truly are and bring us back home to ourselves. I think that's what you're saying.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think it's so important. It's everything. We can try and seek for happiness in the dark, or we can just turn the light on and just live in that presence of what things really are. And
Right.
I'm just blessed to hear from you and just to be in your presence. I feel like quite emotional. It feels closer than in many ways birth family, or when we're connected with such an electric form of love.
Mhm.
It's the most
Yeah.
important thing we can do in our lives, to try and share that with others. And um,
Yeah.
why
Ragas
don't you
called it
share?
our family of the heart.
Well, I guess what you're doing is bringing that family of the heart together in many ways, and sharing
Mm.
that through Whisper in the Heart, and for many people to understand that it is okay to share that connection, and to understand that connection in the form of stories. You were sharing earlier about stories.
Yes.
Why do you think it is that we resonate so much with those stories?
Well, when you think about ancient knowledge, I mean, it was all passed on orally. It wasn't written down. And how do you tell things orally? You tell a story. I
Mm.
mean, Jesus told stories. He told parables, right? He wasn't, giving a lecture about intellectually, this is what will happen if you follow me. It was a story of, the prodigals, whatever it was. And it's a way that people can connect in. And then if I tell you something that happened to me, of me connecting to Maharaji through a photo, the next time you look at a photograph of Maharaji, you're going to think, I could talk to that being. I can connect to that being, even though it's just a photo, right? Yeah. So it's through stories that we connect, not only with the person who's telling the story, but also in how it relates to our own lives. And it's a way to pass things on, to pass on that wisdom or that space, that bhav, that love, um, bypassing the intellect and just going straight for the heart.
Mm.
Yeah.
Could you share something about your time with Maharaji, and maybe bring us into the story of when you were with Maharaji, um, uh, back then at the ashrams, and what that was like for you, and maybe something that stays very close to you, and would love to share with everybody a story of
Uh,
your time.
well, I think I tell this little story in the book, but when we were in Vrindavan, with Maharaji, uh, I was during those days I was smoking beedies, which, as you know, are these terrible little awful fake cigarettes, which is
Right.
a beetle leaf around a tiny bit of very low grade tobacco. And I was basically smoking to hang out with Raghu. Okay. And I really wanted to quit because they were disgusting. I mean, they were truly,
Yeah.
gross little things. But, I was doing it anyway. So I came in one day to the ashram, and Maharaji looks at me and he goes, "Stop smoking beedies." And he goes, "I'm the CID of the heart." The CID, of course, being the Indian version of the CIA.
Right.
So it's like he really just said it straight out. He said, "I know what's in your heart." you know. And of course, I immediately gave away my pack of beedies, and he called me up after lunch and, immediately sort of reaffirmed my giving away, the beedies. It
Yeah.
was sort of like, so it was in so many little ways that he let you know that he knew exactly, where you were, who you were, what you wanted, how your heart was feeling. And he did it in such a way that other people didn't necessarily know what was going on. I think of Radha when we were with Maharaji, and one morning she didn't offer her the toast was burnt or something like that at breakfast, and she didn't offer it to Maharaji. She always offered her food, to him before she ate. And when she and Mohan, who were married at the time, came to the ashram, Maharaji said, "You didn't offer me your food this morning." But he didn't mention that she and her husband had had a big fight. But she knew that obviously if he knew if he knew about the toast,
Yeah.
that he knew about the fight.
Yeah.
So he
And I
knew
get, yeah,
everything. And sitting in
he
front
knew
of
everything.
somebody who knows you inside and out, quite literally, you know, and there's nothing to hide. There's such a tremendous freedom in knowing that this being not only knows everything about you, but unconditionally loves you.
It's
That's
incredible.
very hard to describe because it's not an experience any of us have on, you know, in our ordinary lives. Yeah.
And I think that's where we're freed. We receive freedom to be ourselves, to actually
Mhm.
love with an open heart. If we can have that sense of that Maharaji knows everything, God knows everything, Guru
Right. And
knows
to
everything.
love ourselves. I mean, that's the most important thing. I mean, if we don't love ourselves, it's very hard to serve somebody else in a pure way,
Yeah.
you know. But to know that this being knows literally everything about you and still loves you, you know, is a way to go, well, I must not be so bad. I must be all right, you know?
And for us to also just remain in that heart space and to share
Yeah.
that. I remember one of the talks that Ram Dass was giving. He said that somebody stood up and shouted out before he was just about to start. He had a whole plan of what he wanted to talk about, and then somebody shouted out, "Ram Dass, my heart hurts." And then,
Mm.
he said it just cut through all my bullshit. Everything that I was going to talk about, I had this whole plan, and then, we just, with the whole, however many people, hundreds of people in the crowd, we just were together and had a beautiful
Mm.
satsang of the heart together and just shared our hearts with one and just gave each other our real presence rather than, anything that's contrived or schemed. Just, I really feel like we haven't prepared anything to talk about today. It's just, to be here now and just to be,
Right.
sharing that love that, feels so unconditional and
Mm.
so pure and so special. Like there is nothing else that we could ever give to anybody else apart from that love. And
Mm.
seeing it shine through uh, gives me so much hope
Right.
uh, for the future because that exists.
Yeah, you were talking before about, you know, we live in such difficult times. You know, well, of course, the times have always been difficult.
Right.
Right. There's always been war. There's always been conflict. There's always been division, you know, and I mean, it's what makes the earth, makes this world such a college of learning, you know, such a place where we come to learn our lessons. But to me, the difference is that in having Maharaji, in knowing that I can, you know, figuratively wrap myself in his blanket, it means I can't fall too far. You know, I always know that there's something to catch me. And it's the people who don't feel that there's anything else, you know,
Yeah.
that can spiral into such despair, you know, because I feel like, um, you know, no matter what happens, no matter what I'm faced with, I know I have Maharaji with me.
Right. Yeah.
And that
That
makes
heart.
all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think of Gandhiji when he said, who went through so much fighting for civil rights, colonial against colonial oppression, and he said Ramanama was the staff of my life,
Well,
chanting Ramanam. Yeah,
look, he said Ram Ram when he was shot. You
yeah,
know, you can see how deep his practice was that in that moment, that's what came up was Ram Ram. Yeah,
Ram, and Maharaji was constantly chanting Ram Ram
constantly. Yeah.
and loud as well, wasn't it? Like in the ashram, like how was that noise of hearing him chant?
We didn't, I mean, basically, he would sit and he would do, let me see if you can see this.
Yeah,
You know, he would basically do his mantra on his fingers, you know, not out loud. You know,
Right.
he
Pointing
wasn't
the fingers.
chanting out loud. He was doing, on each knuckle,
Okay,
or
on the knuckles.
knuckle, or whatever, each part, so it was
Yeah,
Ram, 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 Ram,
right.
Ram. Yeah.
And being in that presence of the heart, constantly reminding once, or just being there. Now we have that opportunity to connect with that heart because of uh, wonderful people like yourself who have brought glimpses of it back to the West. I think Ram Dass used that perhaps in Love Everyone is what we did, is that we brought back this glimpse of Maharaji
Right. Right.
for others. And it's just a tremendous service to the world. I consider it social action.
Well,
That if
look at how Krishna Das is spread around the world.
Yeah,
He does kirtans in places I didn't think they knew what the word meant, you know.
yeah. And it's so funny that I mean, we were in London with him a few weeks
Yeah.
ago, and he was chanting Hanuman. He was just about to finish, and the whole crowd was shouting, "Please chant Hanuman Chalisa, please!" Like calling and begging for that. And he was just like saying, "This is ridiculous. Like, what world do we live in, where we're in central London, and hundreds of people are shouting to chant the Hanuman Chalisa and
Mm,
connect with that calling and that heart that
right.
singing it brings." uh,
Right.
that's what gives me hope.
Yeah, when I think of all the Westerners that now know these 40 verses in Hindi, to a monkey god,
Yeah,
it's really quite extraordinary.
yeah, yeah.
It's
And it's
really
not an easy
extraordinary.
thing for Westerners to
Yeah.
learn as well. To be able
Hmm.
to grasp that. But I think that once you've got that bug of the heart, then
Right.
it's so addictive, because you just want to be in that presence all the time. There's
Yeah.
and share that love with others,
Right.
because we can't talk about it. We can only get close. Um, we can tell stories about it, and somewhere that
Right.
resonates.
Yeah.
Where can people get this book, and
Um,
how is
well,
it?
they can get it from ramdas.org. They can get it from Amazon. I'm sure somebody sent me a note. They had picked it up in a bookstore in Tiruvannamalai.
Wow, that's amazing.
So, which was pretty astounding. So, any bookstore will either have it or be able to get it for you. And, as I said, there's always Amazon
Yeah,
around the world.
yeah.
And,
So I think
krishnadas.com. You could also get it from Krishna Das. You could get it from ramdas.org. It's everywhere. Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
so it should be easy enough for people
It
to
should be
find.
easy enough for people.
Um,
Yeah.
I would thoroughly recommend it. I would say that even if people are not interested in spirituality, to understand that from the perspective of the human heart, that we're all one.
Right.
You don't need to believe anything. That this
Yeah,
is
right.
just the story of our human journey, and this, I feel, is the true way for social action, for us to improve, or to make conditions better for the poorest people in the world. That will happen when we touch this heart, which reaches out in the widest possible way. So I hope, I've been an agent for Love Everyone for the past however many years since it's been out, trying to get everybody to read it, because that those stories connected so many people to our work in terms of feeding people and
Mm.
serving people directly in humanitarian situations. And I hope that Whisper in the Heart will do the same thing, and allow people who may have connected to Maharaji themselves but not shared it to actually come and to tell us about it. So I'm hoping that you will receive hundreds of letters from people now that you've gone
Right.
and done this.
I think that we're planning on putting together a Facebook group called Whisper in the Heart, where people can come and share their stories.
That would be amazing, just to
So
document and gather that.
just
Uh,
to, right.
yeah, there are so
Because,
many. I think it was Daniel Goleman talking to Ram Dass, and he said, for many years I was a closet Maharaji devotee, doing my work in emotional intelligence, but really just focusing on the scientific lens, like kind of transparent lens for people, so that they don't get too confused with the spiritual aspects or the heart aspects. And I think there's so many people out there who may have had these experiences or connected with Maharaji or connected with the heart that may want to share that,
Right.
but haven't. So I think you're letting lots of closet bhakti practitioners come out through this sharing.
Yeah.
Which
And know that it's safe to do so.
I know
Yes.
that it's safe to do so. It's not, because I think, for many years the world was like cleansed with secularism in a certain lens, and it was uncool to show your spirituality or your
Yes.
or to talk about the heart. I mean, we went to school for so many years, nobody talked about the heart. It wasn't.
No, I know.
And maybe now it's time for us to kind of be more open to the heart, and to share that with other people. So I just want to say a big thank you. I think it's really important work that you continue to do. Your blessings mean so much to me, and you're sort of helping me to put that together. And I hope Whisper in the Heart really touches many people. And thank you for everything you do.
Well, thank you for everything you do too, because there are, organizations like Go Dharmic are so important in the world. And, in showing people a way in which they can serve and can open their heart within that service is really wonderful. So thank you.
I don't know. I saw Maharaji making me jump here and there from tree to tree. So we'll keep going, and I can't wait to meet you in person, and for us to be together as well. So thank you very much. Ram Ram.
Ram Ram.